We got Wolfgang here today.
Hello.
Probably one of the deepest thinkers I know. Now, we're doing this first episode of my podcast. We're gonna find things out along the way, but we're hoping for a great talk.
Mm-hmm.
So, introduce yourself.
Introduce myself?
That's right.
All right. Well, I'm Wolfgang Roseworth. Currently going to school, going to college, majoring in philosophy. And really my main niche, my main area of expertise and interest is in the areas of spirituality, philosophy, psychedelics.
Oh, don't spoil it now. Let's go into some deep thinking conversation today.
Okay.
Very insightful, very introspective, right?
All right.
Okay. So, I want to know something.
Okay.
I'm going to go straight to the cheese.
All right.
All right. What do you think about thoughts? Do you think they're private?
Thoughts? I know they're not. Unfortunately not.
Hey.
It's okay. It's actually quite scary when you realize that this whole time you've been alive, you've been thinking, you think your head is private, and then in reality you realize, hey, wait a minute, I've been spewing information that the whole universe is gonna know.
Right. So you say, no. Thoughts go out to the universe.
Mm-hmm.
So thoughts are real.
Thoughts are real.
Thoughts are real?
Thoughts are real.
Why do we have to speak them then?
We speak them. Well, we're limited in our communication as human beings. We're in the physical, three-dimensional body, right? Organic. And unfortunately, our mind is locked in with this system. Our consciousness is tied to our body. It's not like people just have like out-of-body experiences just spontaneously.
Right.
And so we have to deal with the limitations of living in a physical reality, physical dimension. And in order to communicate our thoughts, we have to use spoken language,
right.
Generally. Also written language, but we have to appeal to the five senses, the five main senses that we use to perceive the world.
Perceiving the world. Let's
right.
talk about perception for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Can we really trust our senses? Now, there's this notion about altered senses not being fully trustworthy. Now, people get drunk.
Right.
Let's say people get on different states of reality, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
That alter your senses. How can we come to understand if we can trust our senses then, if they can be altered and they can make us understand things that maybe in this reality, in the physical realm, we don't see them, but we do feel, right?
Right. Well, I would say that we shouldn't trust our senses. In philosophy, there's a big debate over what is truth, right? How do you know what is true and what is not illusion, and what is reality? And a big part of that, of my thinking, is similar to, I believe, René Descartes, who said, I believe it's cognito ergo sum, or in English it's I think, therefore I am.
That's correct.
Right?
Yes.
And so I like that saying a lot because it's, it's simple, but it gets down to the basic fundamental principle of what 100% is true. That because you can think that you exist.
So it's our duty to know that what we think is true, right?
Well, it's our duty to know that of the fundamental fact that we exist as truth.
Right.
And then start from that foundation that we know is absolute truth and build up from there. Because if we start from a proposition or, a logic that we can't really guarantee for sure, then we can build a whole worldview around that principle and then watch it collapse if we discover information that, we find out to be
Which
false.
is dangerous.
Which is dangerous.
It's dangerous. Now, we don't want our beliefs to be collapsed, ever, right?
I mean, sometimes.
Sometimes it's needed.
Sometimes it's needed. But, it's more traumatic. It's more traumatic.
Now that we talk about how sometimes it's needed, the idea of ego death.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is a real transformation. So can we say that an ego death is a real transformation? Let me put it like this. An ego death, to be on the same page, is the intellectual, let's say, the intellectual synonym of letting go, right?
Right.
Letting go of everything, right? Ego death is, I am nothing. For the first time, right?
Right.
Because we're nothing before we're born, and we're nothing again when an ego death happens. Is it just mental, or is it real? Is it just thoughts, or is it our whole scheme of thinking just breaking down in the front of our faces? What is it?
Well, my perception of ego death has just really been about the concept of the one, or unity, right? I mean, there's this belief in spiritual thinking that basically the whole universe, right, came from a source, a point, a singularity. You know, like black holes, they collapse into an infinitely small point, a one dimension, a one hole. And so I believe that what is happening in the ego death is that the division between you and the universe, right, it ceases to exist. And so really you are like becoming one with everything, which is like nothing at the same time. It's like an everythingness and a nothing, like a void.
You become a void.
You become a void.
Right.
And it sounds scary, right? And I believe it is scary if you don't know what you're doing and you enter that state of being, because you're one with everything, right? I mean,
right.
But I think the transformational principle behind that is good, because it shows that in that state of consciousness, there is infinite possibilities. You know, here living in this physical reality with the circumstances that we've been given, we you know, how do we know who chose our ego, right? Like, who made you, and what made me? Like,
some would argue that our experiences are everything that shaped what we are,
right?
That formed us, right? Like, we had a mold before coming here. There's a mold,
all right,
and experiences shaped that throughout time, throughout what we live, how we understand what we're living, right?
Right.
But in that sense, how do you find out who you are, right? How does the ego die?
How does the ego die?
How does the ego die?
Well, I mean, there are multiple ways you can get it to do that. That different processes, different tools people have found. But I think the best thing you should do before trying to go out and try and give yourself an ego death is have a really firm grip of who you are, right? Remembering who you are. Because I believe, from my research and my experiences, that there is some sort of memory wiping going on when we're born to lead us to the perception of linear time, right? There is a beginning and there is an end, right? But I mean, if you think about it, especially with like how quantum physics works and string theory and just the experiences of those who've done things like ayahuasca and DMT, is that you can perceive beyond linear time, where, you know, time becomes timeless, like a loop, right?
A loop.
It's like,
loop is scary.
It is scary.
Yeah.
You know, because there's good loops and there's bad loops, and you don't want to be stuck in a bad loop.
Well, and this is because, well, my understanding, which is almost null, of substances like ayahuasca, like DMT, these are very powerful state of consciousness, right?
Right.
Now, are we meant to experience them? Are we meant to experience such a powerful altered state of existence that everybody's supposed to do it? That's something I still don't understand. Is it just a way to escape our reality, or forming a new one? Like, there's so many questions that can arise from that, and I think that now that you've touched the subject, it's really an insight that we will never get to grasp on fully, right? You know, in Colombia, I come from Colombia.
Right.
right? And you know how in the Amazon, these Indian tribes, what they do is ayahuasca rituals. have you heard of it?
Of course.
It's something that it's a forced ego death, basically, right? I don't have fully understanding of it, but what can it be?
Well, I think that substances like ayahuasca, psilocybin, DMT, mescaline, I mean, there's all sorts of psychedelic compounds. And besides even the psychedelics, there's even negative compounds that are psychoactive that affect the brain. And then there's substances that can be turned psychedelic, believe it or not, like THC and CBD, believe it or not.
CBD?
CBD.
Okay.
Right. And there's other herbs and things that also have psychoactive properties that can lead to psychedelic results. You know, like the ancient Egyptians.
What is a psychedelic result, if I may ask? Now, is psychedelic exclusively meant to describe the effects of a substance, or exactly what is it?
Right. I believe when people talk about psychedelics, right, and what is a psychedelic, is to do with the mind and the expansion of awareness, right? So, like, what differentiates a psychedelic from, like, a typical drug like cocaine or marijuana or, you know, just alcohol even, is that a lot of these substances are psychoactive, which means that they have effects on brain chemistry, behavior, but you're not necessarily expanding your senses or your state of perception beyond what you already know. Like, for example, if you drink alcohol, you know, you're not going to suddenly teleport outside of your body and have a third eye. That'd be freaky. But it transforms the senses you already know into a different state. Whereas psychedelics have this sort of mind-expanding property that lets you perceive senses and feelings that you've never felt before and that you can't feel normally.
But it's your same mind. It's the same body that you are. It's everything the same, being enhanced.
Exactly.
For some, right?
Right.
Again, not meant for everybody. Correct?
No, not everybody. It's not everybody's tea, you know.
Which is okay.
Which is okay.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, there are different ways. You don't have to use psychedelics for your life to get where you want to be. There are processes, natural processes, that will allow you to get the same results, no substances needed, and technically is probably the safer route to go.
Right. Now,
right.
The power of belief. Power of belief comes into every state of consciousness.
Right.
Every state of you understanding reality, everything goes in the mind. Your ideas, your thoughts. Everything makes what you believe real or not, right? So, power of belief.
Power of belief.
Things exist because we think they do. Now, when we're on any state, sober or not, we think and then we make things real, like we were saying before, right?
Right.
Now, placebo effects are wild. Placebo effects can happen on any type of understanding of reality, right? Now, people, you think that psychedelics might make them feel like they heal because they're getting medicine. So if belief alone can affect the body, what else is just built out of our expectations, right? What else do we think and then we make real without it necessarily being real in the material world, right?
Right. Well, there is definitely a huge power of belief. And, I mean, when I was a kid growing up, I had a real scientific, kind of almost like a Neil deGrasse Tyson like way of life. Like, you can't prove this, blah, 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 blah. Very scientific, logical. And my belief is, if there's ghosts, if there's spirits, why hasn't it been proven? Why isn't it obvious? Shouldn't they be walking around? Which is a good question, you know? I mean, if there's been billions of people that have lived and died, and not just humans, but dinosaurs. Where are the dinosaur ghosts? Why? Who's asking about the dinosaur ghosts? Aren't they walking around? And so my thinking has always been, it should be too obvious, right, that these things exist. And instead we use words like belief. Like, oh, do you believe in God? Oh, do you believe in spirits? Oh, it's not like a proven fact, like there is a sky, obviously. There are trees, obviously. So my thinking used to be very logical, very left-brained, logic, what I could see, what I could feel. And I basically got interested in this psychedelic spirituality by coming to terms with basically being an adult. Like through high school, I was more depressed, thinking that I'm stuck in a material world. You're going to work and do all of these things, and then you die and you lose all of your information, and then that's it. It's just eternal blackness. That's a very depressing perspective, right? And that's not good. And so, in trying to cope with the reality, I discovered that people have been doing these magic mushrooms, psilocybin-containing mushrooms, and dimethyltryptamine, DMT, and ayahuasca. Like people go on these ayahuasca retreats, and peyote, and San Pedro cactus. There's all these different retreats and spiritualities. And so as a kid, again, I associated these substances all just under the category of drugs. Like all drugs are bad, don't do them, or your face will be all weird, you'll be all messed up, not good, your life will be ruined. But then I had a more nuanced view of learning about this. It's not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, right? It's some are good, some are bad, and some have no necessarily morality. It's just they're tools, right? They're tools. It's just the same thing as a gun. A gun can be used for good or evil or neither. It's a tool.
Now, and that's the thing. Are psychedelics a tool for growth? Mm-hmm. Are they? Or they're just a way to check out from the reality when it's too heavy? Right. Those are two notions that can either take you to doom or take you to illustration, right? Illustration of the self.
Right.
That's something that's the thin line between deception and reality. Because as soon as you misuse these tools, you get lost. You get lost in translation.
Right.
Right. Mm-hmm. You were telling me the other day about this story. Jim Morrison. No, not Jim Morrison. Interview with Eric Andre.
Right.
What was his name?
I think his name is Morris Hamilton, I believe. Hamilton Morris, his friend, right?
Right. So to give a little background and context on who Hamilton Morris is, he is a YouTuber that stays on the field of science and experimenting with chemistry, right? Mm-hmm. He tells his story about his best friend when he was in his freshman year of college, if I'm not mistaken. Can you refresh us of how it went?
Yeah, I believe the story is that this Hamilton Morris, right?
That's right.
I think so. He had this friend, and he had, I'm not sure if it was LSD or mushrooms, but he had a really bad trip, and then that was a catalyst for awakening schizophrenia.
Right.
And that's a big issue with these psychedelics, and just higher perception in general is not losing touch with reality and also recognizing the physical constraints that you've been given. Now, I believe that there's a rule, right, that if your family has been diagnosed with certain mental health conditions, like mainly schizophrenia, I think also bipolar disorder, that psychedelics are bad because they'll
awaken it in a way?
Yeah, it'll like increase the time to come on, right? Because I believe in the brain it's certain HT receptors that psychedelics bind to that determine your reality, right? It's like your brain's awaking reality signals. And schizophrenics have altered receptors. And so
Right.
psychedelics are intentionally activating those receptors. And so you're bringing on the condition sooner than it might not have to be.
And that's the thin line.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. It's especially important for those individuals, and everyone in general should recognize their own mental health state.
As we said before, it's better to know yourself before getting lost knowing yourself, right?
Right, of course.
Yes. So, tell me, talking about your trip on your journey in life, actually, from being someone rather more logical, more I see, and what I see is what's true, and this is what I believe to be reality, right?
Right.
When you were younger. After time goes by, if I'm not mistaken, you can correct me if I'm wrong, you start to go into the notion that there's a spiritual world here,
Yes.
right? And in that world, you've found a way to intertwine science and spirituality.
Right.
Comes to my question, spirituality and science, are they coexistent?
Absolutely. And a lot of people, for some reason, don't think so, but that's always been a struggle between science and faith. And I think that the main issue here is not recognizing, it is coming to terms with the fact that you don't know, right?
Right.
Where people think, oh, I know this is it, this is blah, 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 there can be no more science done, there can be no more technology, this is as good as it gets, and then humans figure out a way to make things better, right? You know, like the concept of laptops, computers, and cameras would have been mind-blowing technology to ancient people, but now it's simple everyday life, and we know the science behind it. And so I would say things like spirituality, or I would use the term even magic, right? Magic. Because people think of magic as, sort of hoo-ha, weird rituals, primitive thinking.
Right.
But I would describe it as really science that we just don't understand yet. Because of the fact that under substances and meditation, astral projection, so many ways you can get yourself into the spiritual dimension and then see interdimensional entities, non-human intelligence, crazy things like that.
Which are still metaphysical concepts.
Which are metaphysical concepts, but they're rooted in reality because it is, right? It exists, and attempting to find an explanation of how that exists, and then what is the relationship between us as humans and then what they're doing? Why aren't they helping us out? Like, why are there good ones? Why are there bad ones? Are they good? Are they bad? There's eternal amount of questions to try and figure out and explain the existence of these things. But what I love about the use of psychedelics, especially DMT, is that it's such a fast transformation that will show you just how far the rabbit hole goes.
Right. I understand what you're saying. I've come to multiple conclusions on the question I was asking you, and is us as believers of anything, as believers of, let's say, Allah, let's say Javed, let's say whatever you believe in, there is the duty of care to know that everything can be explained, right?
Right.
It has to be through science. Now, there's things that we don't understand, and because we don't understand them, that doesn't mean that it's not there, right?
Right.
It's like before fire was discovered, who would have thought fire would have been a thing, right? So you saw, let's say we're a nomad tribe, and we're just walking down, I don't know, any territory, and we see a lightning strike, boom, out of nowhere a tree starts to burn and we see fire. Does that mean that there's a god of thunder that threw thunder and he made this magical light appear out of nowhere? I mean, no. That means they didn't have the knowledge to know what fire was, right?
Right.
So, what I'm trying to get to is, we've got science trying to explain everything.
Of course.
Right? And we got spirituality that talks about things that we merely understand. Energy, vibrations, how does our body communicate through this, through vibrations, through energy, and, more of the mystical concepts of how our body works, right?
Right.
What if both of these perspectives are trying to explain the same from different angles, right? It's two sides of the same coin. To my perspective, it's whatever we feel like is true. It might be, but we have the duty of getting to the answer. We have the duty of intellectually growing until knowing, okay, what I believed was wrong, or it was right. But we have the duty to know.
Right.
Now, your path. How has your path shown you what you believe is what should be true to you?
What's true to me?
That's right.
Well, I've been going through it and writing it all down. I think I was telling you this earlier, but a lot of people will take their religion or spirituality they were born into and then base their whole worldview and perception around that. And even then, they might not personally relate it to themselves, right? Because, all of these stories, all of these topics and these concepts, they're not tailored to you, to your ego, to your identity, how it relates to you, right? And what your function is in the cosmic, divine order of things, in the world, basically. What's your function? What's your role? What's your purpose? Your meaning of your life in particular. Not the meaning of life, but the meaning of you. And my perspective is, what is the reason why we do things? What are we working towards, right? And I can basically boil it down into two things, right? Good and evil, a duality, right?
Right.
And there's these concepts that, okay, if we're one, if we're whole, then does that mean that evil is a necessary part of the universe?
It should be balanced.
Right? However, I think there is an illusion here that people don't see, right? They say, oh, you have to take the good with the bad, right?
Right.
My thinking is, though, is this universe, and you can look at the systems of nature, right? You can see beauty out in nature, beautiful flowers and trees and waterfalls, right? Absolute beauty, natural beauty. But then you have to come to terms with the natural, horrific elements that stuff that nobody likes talking about, things like hurricanes and storms, and then the food chain, right? Living things have to eat other living things.
Yeah.
Now, why was it designed like that, right? Would a good creator want to see suffering? Of course not.
Well, let me interrupt you there.
Okay.
I think that the concept of a good creator has always been mistaken. I don't think it's a matter of good or bad creator. The creator is an essence. The creator is an essence that was there, is there. But good or bad from a creator, we cannot judge that. What I understand. Because at the end of the day, nature has got to follow its curse, right? Nature, selective nature. Everything is meant to happen the way it's meant to happen. It's a way of understanding things that maybe the creator doesn't have to be good. Something might be out there, but should it be good?
Of course. To me, the whole goal of what we're working towards is better, perfection, right? less suffering, less pain, less death, more happiness, longer life, right?
Right.
We're always working towards getting rid of the negatives, right? But these negative systems, what are they, right? Are they creations, right? People say, oh, you create evil. Or are they really corruptions? And my perspective is this, is if the source of reality, right, the unity, the harmony, being one together, right, with energy and perfection, it's not an evil thing. It's an intentionally good divine source, right? It's an intentionally good divine whole. Now, how does evil play into that role?